Your competitors just slashed their prices. They're taking your customers and you had no idea. By the time you find out, it's too late. You've already lost the deal. And you're wondering, what else did I miss? So I built an AI that watches your competitors for you. Every price change, every bad review, every new hire, anything. The second that something happens, you and whoever you want in the company will know about it. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I built it, give you the full architecture layout, and you can grab the system for free in the description below. Let's get into it. So here we are at the result of everything that we've been building over the last 2 hours that you haven't seen yet because I'm starting with the end at the beginning. Open loop. So what we've done here is create an imaginary company called Project Flow, and we pretty much do the same thing as ClickUp, Asana, Notion, those type of products. And we ran it through our software to find out what our competitors are up to so that we know how to pivot or tell our salespeople how to pivot. Because wouldn't it be awesome if we knew all of this stuff up front and our salespeople knew how to respond to the things coming their way? So the first thing that we have over here is our sales battle card. Now this is what the salespeople would use to adapt to the changing landscape for a specific competitor. Don't worry, ClickUp, some of these results are fabricated just for dummy data, but a lot of it is pulled from your actual stuff, so maybe you should pay attention. So at a glance, the threat is that there is a high threat for our company. There was a 37% price drop on ClickUp's business tier, which is a direct attack on our mid-market. The exploit here is that complexity kills. So we can position ourselves against their learning curve for their software. Because if we take a further look down here, one of their weaknesses is that 67 people mentioned their product is overwhelmingly complex, which is really good for us because that means we can sell our super simple tool a lot easier and use that as leverage. Then we talk about price. So $12 versus $29 and $49, us being the more expensive one at this point in imagination land. So we deliver 2 to 3 more billable hours a week, which is $17K a year extra revenue per person. This is something that our salespeople will use to pivot on later, as you'll find out. So the recent changes that our tool find that happened to ClickUp is that they had this price drop of 37% on their business tier, but then they also have 2 new hires, VP of Product and a VP of Professional Service. And that tells us that they are probably making some moves in the professional services area. So we come on down to their positioning, and this little thing will give our salespeople their value proposition so that we can kind of look at what ours is and then not so much compare it, but see how we can be different to them, which I suppose is a comparison at the end of the day. Then we have target customers, so we can see how we differ from them in who we are targeting, but at this point we're mostly the same kind of people. It shows what their customers love. So this is really important to us because it shows us perhaps what our software could be lacking or what we should implement, and then at the end of the day try and make better. But again, this is from a sales perspective, so our salespeople just need to understand this information when people might say, we prefer ClickUp because of X, Y, Z. Then we talk about our advantages. So we have advanced resource forecasting, which in imagination land is better than ClickUp's. We have native time tracking, professional services focus, so ours is better than theirs for professional services. We have fast implementation, so ours only takes 2 weeks versus their 6 to 8 weeks, which is a common complaint in their weaknesses section from Trustpilot. And we have dedicated support, which people love. So another thing this thing does is give our salespeople the main price objection. Now, people always object on price, whether you're in the services industry or whether you're providing a product, whatever it is. So what this thing does is give us a whole bunch of reasons about how we can get over these price objections. The first one was the one that I discussed at the beginning of this, which was up here. It just highlights the top 3 things. So you can see it's reiterated down here, but if I wanted to, I could fill out the other ones that we have in our database as well, so that our salespeople would have different angles when they get onto calls with people about how to get over these price objections. Yes, your products are cheaper, but if you go with us, you're going to save more money and time over a longer period of time. Then the risk signals. So if you hear these things, we need to keep costs low and what's your best price? You know that these people are just really focused on price as opposed to value, in which case you need to try and pivot their mindset away from that price-only thing towards the value that they get out of using our product, something like that. And then we also have a walk-away section where if you hear some of these things, you just know that the people that you've either got on the phone right now, you're talking to via support, they're probably not going to end up buying our product because they're not a good fit. And then, like I mentioned, we have their strengths and their weaknesses. Not sure why I'm reading from right to left, but the point being is that this little battle card will really help your sales team. And for the most part, you can make this as small as you want. I wanted to make it all flashy and colorful for YouTube, but realistically, you could make this something super simple. But this isn't how our flow actually starts. If we have a really big problem and there was a high threat coming in, before we even had that report emailed to us, what we could have is this coming straight into Slack or Teams or something like that. And you could have a competitor analysis group like I've got over here. You could also get a DM directly to sales heads or C-level people and it will tell you a high-level threat. So here we have ClickUp is now a 10 out of 10 threat. We need to suddenly act. And it tells us exactly what we saw in those reports in bullet point form here. What changed, why it matters, the market signals, and the recommended actions that we should take as a business in order to deal with this massive threat that's coming our way. Now, of course, you can also have multiple teams in here. You can have multiple companies that we've been looking at for our threat intelligence. So it wouldn't just be ClickUp. We could have Notion in here as well, Asana, Monday.com, whatever. All listed in here. And then we can either update our battle card or we can do a full analysis. But then we can take it one step further. And apart from our salespeople, obviously, us as a business need to act as a whole. So this is where you would have an executive briefing, and this would be emailed, say, every Friday. This runs as a cron job and it gets updated, and we get new information to see how the landscape is evolving. And you can see over here that we've got 3 high threats. So let's come down and have a look at them. What happened? Pricing dropped 37%. So you can see it's reiterating what we saw on the sales battle card. Why this matters. So it tells us why it matters. Immediate actions that we can take as a company, what we're doing about it. So we've already made a sales battle card for all of our salespeople. At-risk deals have been identified, and the product team is assessing the future roadmap and our priorities behind our product. And then it provides a simple recommendation: maintain premium positioning, double down on ROI messaging, and implementation speed advantages. And then you can see who owns this as well. If we had any medium threats, they would be in here, but we've only got high threats at the moment. We also have a pricing tracker, so every week this would get updated to track their prices, but obviously people don't change their prices every week. It's just more to show a dashboard. If we had multiple people in here, some of them might be going up and down depending on the time of year, whatever it is. And then market validation, so you can see here their review growth, we have that listed, and we have a hiring spike because it's obviously important. Say they're hiring a whole bunch of AI engineers, we know that they might be doubling down on really pumping AI into their product, which obviously we already know that they do, but for the most part, it's just to understand where they're growing with their product. And then review intelligence over here, it just gives us a high-level summary of 4.2 stars based on 487 reviews, and common pain points which become our opportunities. So this is all pulled from Trustpilot. And then we have some action items down here. So obviously, this is at a really high level, and again, it was from like 3 prompts after I'd gathered all the data. I mean, really, we could make this do whatever we want. So the next logical progression is to probably put this into some kind of dashboard and maybe even a beautiful front end. Who knows? Maybe you could turn this into a fully fledged SaaS. Probably could, to be honest. But for the most part, businesses really just want this information so they can act. I don't really want to have to sit there and click through a whole bunch of things in order to find stuff. So while having a front end is pretty and it looks good on YouTube, a lot of the times you don't really need a front end, you just need the data to make a business decision to act fast enough. So if we can do all of that without needing to click, then we would probably go down that route. But enough waffling. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to skip onto the architecture overview, some fun police stuff, and then we're going to get into the actual build, which took about an hour and a half of back and forth. There were a few issues, but as you'll soon find out, they're really easy to get over. So let's move on. Cool. So before we jump into the build, I like to start with a little bit of system design and thinking about the context that we're going to be doing for this video. So just like the context that I'm about to give you, context engineering is super important for anything that you're trying to build. Because essentially what we're doing is we're coming up with what the definition of good is, and then we're backtracking all the way, process by process, step by step, of everything that's involved in getting us to that point. So not only does it help you learn critical thinking, but it also helps your system understand exactly what good looks like. If we can't define that, we couldn't possibly develop a system that knows how to do that. And that's a lot of the problems that you see now, where someone will use AI and they will ask it to do something, but they will ask it at such a high level that it produces a terrible output, and then they say that this platform is terrible. So whatever you put in is what you're going to get out of that system, which is why context engineering is so important. Now, I will have a video on context engineering separate to this because it's quite an in-depth topic, but for the most part, just know that our goal here is to get to a definition of done. So at a high level, what we're building here, suppose you've already seen the end product. Hopefully this all panned out and the next hour of my life is not going to be a complete waste. But if everything did go as planned, what we are building is a competitor intelligence scraper. So the core problems that we're solving are that your competitors are constantly evolving, especially now that AI is around. Everybody is moving super fast. So it's really important to understand what they're doing, the moves they're making, and studying their signals to see how we can either adapt to whatever it is that they're doing or be even better than them. So we look for a few things. Pricing changes. When they undercut or raise rates, you need to know instantly, because obviously you want to either match that or see if you can offer someone a better deal, whatever. It depends on the type of industry that you're in. If you're in a service industry, I would never compete on price because that's just a race to the bottom. But sometimes you'll notice with a lot of SaaS products, they might offer a discount compared to their competitors, or they change their pricing in a way that makes them more attractive to what everyone else is doing. The second one is product launches, so new features and offerings that shift the market. Have they got better tech than you? What could you do that's better than them? Stuff like that. Positioning shifts, changes in their messaging, executive movements. So if they have a new CMO that comes in, you want to know about that because that means that they're going to do a big marketing push. Have they got a new CTO? Is he super smart? Does he bring a network behind him that could increase their sales a lot faster? Stuff like that. I don't want to go through every single one of these because then the video will be way too long, but you get the point. These are super important things to understand, and that's why we're going to be monitoring them. Cool. So that brings us neatly onto layer 1, which is the data collection layer. And this is where we're going to collect everything that we want to know about these people. So obviously website pages, we're going to be scraping those. We're going to be looking for people who do offer their prices on their website. We're going to be scraping those product pages, about page, that sort of stuff. The blog content, so people writing blogs, if they're writing social posts, we want to know all about that so that we can analyze what they're doing. What are they talking about in public? What are people in the comments saying? We want to look at job postings because if they have a careers page and they're bringing in new talent into their business, we want to know about that. If they're hiring for 20 engineers, we know that they're doing a massive push towards a new build. If they're AI engineers, then we know that they're implementing something massive in the AI space within their product. So we want to know about that. Then obviously we're checking social media for signals like that. We're checking review sites because that tells us a lot. It tells you what do people hate about their product that you could then offer to your salespeople to say, we're not like that, our product's way better because X, Y, Z. Or you can find out what people love about their product and implement it or make it better in your product. Tons of reasons why you want review data because it really exposes a lot of stuff. Then funding databases. So if they just raised a new round of funding, that's really important to understand because again, that means they have more money, they have more backing, so they can move really fast. And then executive profiles, if you want to scrape C-level people and find out what they're doing, find out about them, for whatever reason that might be good for your business, you can do that as well. So at a high level, the agent maintains a list of competitor URLs and data sources, and on a schedule, it visits each URL to scrape them. It extracts structured data using multiple scrapers in parallel, and then it aggregates from public databases. Now, depending on what you're doing, you could use a whole bunch of tools for this. So I was originally going to use Crunchbase, but then I realized that I already had an Apollo premium subscription, so I can gather most of this data just using Apollo. So I'm going to be using Apollo mostly for this, but just note that obviously we can chop and change tools whenever we want. So layer 2 is the parsing layer, and this is where we take the raw HTML text from the competitor websites and all of our external data sites. We extract everything that we want, and then we pass the information for things that are meaningful for us. So we separate the two layers. You can see here, we're going to be grabbing the pricing, product pages, we extract their key features, their unique selling points, their integrations. Blog posts, we want the title, the publish date, the topic, category, job postings. We want the title, the seniority level, the required skills, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. We're extracting the most important information from there. Then layer 3 is the change detection. So this is past data from this week and the historical data from last week. So we want to track their movements and see what they're doing in this landscape. So is there any new pricing that they've done? Has something been removed? Do they have increases or decreases in price? How fast are they hiring? Their content velocity, how many times do they post? What kind of content do they post? Has it changed? Has their messaging changed? Are they talking about something new? Stuff like that. Review sentiment. Have they suddenly got massive 5-star reviews or dropped down to 1-star reviews? Maybe they launched something new and that totally wrecked their product, in which case we would know to never implement something like that in our product. Starting to get the point, I hope. So we store all of that data in a simple database. Again, you could choose something. If you were building a massive product for a client, you could use something like Superbase or something in AWS. But for the most part, for this build, I'm just going to be doing it locally, probably in some simple format on SQL database. And then we're just going to compare last week with this week. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We want to do it this way because we want to ignore any noise. So if they're doing minor updates and things like that, we don't want to be tracking that, which brings us on to layer 4, and that's the threat scoring. So not everything is equal. For instance, if they're doing something that isn't related to you at all, we don't need to track that. We don't need to know about it because it doesn't influence what we're doing. So we want to build some form of intelligence into this that aligns with what we're doing within our company so that it understands, okay, this is a threat to you and you need to take care of it. So that's what this little block is going to do over here. And then layer 5 is our market positioning context. So we take the threat score change and our positioning data and we mix the two together so that we understand whether this is relevant to us or whether we can just forget about it. So that's what happens at layer 5. And then layer 6 is the intelligence output and the sales enablement. And this is a really, really important layer because this gives us all the intelligence information that we need, but then it actually applies it to something meaningful in the business. And in this case, it's for sales enablement. So if there are moves in specific segments of the business that are important to you, your salespeople can be armed with a battle card immediately that they can go out with when they're selling to people. Oh, our product is way better than competitor because reason X, Y, Z. And we would have scraped all that information to find out stuff about them, about why we are better based on current trends within the market. So for instance, your salespeople could have a pre-call brief that says prospect is also evaluating competitor X who just cut pricing by 20% and launched feature Y. That's really important because the real-time update can give them the information that they need to deal with any objections that the client might have for the product that we're selling. So when they mention competitor X's new AI feature, here's how we respond to that. And that's really important. You can see before they jump on the call, they can have a whole list of objections already handled. And we can say, this is why we're better than our competitor who's doing that type of thing. And it's also going to give us a weekly executive threat briefing. So we can send this via email. We can send this via Slack. And then we have response playbooks. So automated recommendations that we can give our salespeople, or we can give a group of C-level people within the organization to understand how they're going to respond to this change or this threat that is now coming towards their new product. They can know about these things in real time as fast as it happens. And then we want to have a review site intelligence dashboard because it's really cool to see metrics. We can see what's going up, what's going down, how many threats we have, what the threats are, stuff like that. And then a pricing elasticity tracker. So we don't just want to track price changes. We also want to track the market reaction to these. At this point, I'm not really sure how it's going to be doing that thing, but it'll be interesting to find out if the system knows how to do it. Because again, while all of these are amazing ideas, I haven't actually built this, although you've seen the end. So I guess I did build something, but time travel aside, the point being is that I'm going into this completely blind, just as if you were doing it, because I want to show you how to think critically and how to build while we're building along, rather than just have all of this stuff done for you. So finally, it gives us structured data export. If we wanted it, it might be useful to put into another system. And then I've just covered the data flow over here. But for the most part, we have a few key design decisions. Again, I'm not going to go into those now. I will share this whole thing as an export so that you can just use it yourself if you wanted to. But this brings us on to the definition of done. And this is why context engineering is so important, because the system needs to understand what good looks like to you. For instance, if you say to one of your friends, I'm really hungry, go into the kitchen and cook me some food, and they come back with a pot of vegetables and you hate vegetables, are they really the person to blame, or are you the person to blame for not giving them enough context? And that brings us on to the whole AI being shit thing. A lot of people say that because they put in the bad input and they get bad output. So the definition of done needs to be crystal clear. You need to have this picture of what good looks like for the system to understand so it can build towards that for you. So our company is Project Flow, a mid-market project management software. We have a target of 100 to 2,000 employee companies. Our price is $29 per user per month for professional and $49 for enterprise. Key differentiator, advanced resource forecasting and native time tracking. Current positioning, built for professional service firms who bill by the hour. So I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be around, but for the most part, billing by the hour still works for a lot of places. Competitors that we're monitoring, Asana, Monday.com, ClickUp, Teamwork, and Rike. Cool. These are all major players. So again, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. It will take ages, but what I'm doing here is I'm just giving it successful output examples. So all I'm going to be doing is this whole brief that we've just gone through. I'm going to paste it into our agentic workflow, and it's going to magically and hopefully run away and build this thing. But for the most part, this is the Slack alert section over here. So you can see we've got high threat, immediate action required. This would come into whichever relevant team or group chat, and it would tell us why it matters, what changed, what the market signals are, the recommended actions that we should take, and the sales talking points around those things. We can also have sales battle cards. So these can go to a sales group. It can go to individual salespeople, whatever. Tells them all the positioning, their strengths, the things that they can do, the weaknesses behind this move that they're making, any customer complaints, things like that. Basically everything that we just discussed in the system, we're just giving the AI a definition of good. And this is the structure that we want, this identical thing here, because it's very neat. And then next up, we've got a weekly executive briefing, which is sent on a Friday at this point, but you could obviously schedule it to whatever you want. Lists all of the threats and recommendations just in a larger form so that we understand the landscape as a whole. And that will help the business understand how they can figure out what to do about this threat that's just come into them. And then you have deal level alerts, which again is super important. And then finally, I'm just giving this thing a very concise example of the definition of done with some bullet points. And on that note, we have now finished overviewing the system, so we can pretty much just dive in. Cool, so we grabbed everything that we need from Notion. Now I'm just going to copy and paste it straight into Claude Code, and I'm going to give it a little bit of context first. Today, I want to build a competitor analysis tool. It scrapes leads and does a whole bunch of other stuff based on what you can see. I'll paste in the full architecture below. If you need any API keys for Apollo, let me know and I'll paste those in. And Relevance API, I will update you with a company scraping tool API when you need it. Analyze the architecture and build everything out for me. Okay, so now I'm just going to do, and you know what, I'm going to give it full bypass permission. Let's do this. So now hopefully this thing should just go out and build whatever we want it to build. I'm ready to build out the competitor analysis tool. I can see from the system handbook that I should work with the established... you know what? I was an idiot. I did not paste in what I wanted. Cool. There we go. Okay, so now I've pasted in the full architecture. Now it's going to go away and just build everything. And it's probably going to ask for some API keys along the way because, again, we need the Relevance API scraper for LinkedIn, and it will need my Apollo API key so that it can go and grab all of the other signals that we need. As I mentioned earlier, you could use Crunchbase, you could use Clutch. For instance, Clutch can be somewhat valuable because you can find out what companies charge per hour for their services, what their minimum price project is. So if you're in more of a services-based business, like a lot of people are, if they're in AI consulting or AI agency workspace at the moment, then that could be pretty useful for you. See what your competitors are doing. But for the most part, Apollo can grab a lot of information. Cool, so now it's given us an update of to-dos. Create SOP for competitor intelligence workflow, create config files, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to go through each of these one by one until it does exactly what we need it to do. And if it doesn't, we're just going to ask questions and prod it to get where we want to go. I imagine for the front end, we're definitely going to have to be doing a lot of tweaking. If it got the front end right the first time, I would be highly surprised, especially because I want it to look a certain way. You could definitely use other tools for this. So Lovable is obviously an amazing tool, and you could definitely use it for that. I've used it for a lot of stuff. But you got to think about the cost and how many credits that's going to burn in your Lovable space versus what you can actually get out of this thing. So if you already have Claude and some API credits and all of that stuff, I would just go with this. But let's see how it outputs it. This is probably the biggest thing that I've built with Claude Code at the moment. There are massive steps involved in this. It's even bigger than the sales tool that I built. If you haven't seen the video, it's on the screen now. But this is huge. So I would be surprised if it did this without me running out of credits. But either way, I'll just top up then. The amazing thing about this is that it shows why everyone is so focused on go-to-market at the moment. I don't know if you've seen everyone is suddenly a GTM expert. I'd never really heard the term until about a year ago when everyone started talking about it. And I think the reason that they're doing that is because the only thing that matters now is speed. Because a 16-year-old or even a 12-year-old could build something like this. And essentially, if they have the ability to go out and find people to back them, they could sell this thing. And if you have a cult following and you have a tool that is widely used and super popular, you win. So it's that straightforward now. But obviously that brings into question, like, what do you actually need to know in order to do your job? And it hasn't changed much. I mean, if I look back on my 10-year career in cybersecurity, working at all these massive companies, the only skills that I ever really used were the ones I use now. So it was sales. And if you break down sales into what it really is, it's effective communication. It's talking to people in a way where you sound confident, but you also convince them that the thing that you're doing or talking about is worth them investing in or acting on. That's all sales is. Like, if you convince someone to marry you, that's a sale. If you convinced a bunch of people to be your friend over literally anyone else in the world, that's a sale. So you got to think about it from that perspective. But then the second thing, which is critical thinking, that's not just critical thinking anymore, because you need to have a balance between learning critical thinking and applying it for yourself, but then getting AI to make it even better, because some of the points you might not think about, this thing will help you think about those faster. But if you only use AI, you're never going to train your critical thinking. So you have to have this symbiotic relationship where you guys are working together, because your strategy is what's really important for any client at the moment. Your strategy is what separates you from everyone else. And obviously there's a whole bunch of context and nuance in the human relationships that the AI will never understand at the time of me recording this video. But that's why it's a super important skill for you guys to learn. And then finally, adaptability has always been universal. It's always been, how do you respond under pressure, sometimes even extreme pressure? The times I've gone to work and bad things have happened has been insane over the last 10 years. But every single day, you keep going, you do what needs to be done. And that, again, is what separates you from the people who crumble or flee or don't know how to respond in those situations. So if you mix those three things with AI in the play, you're pretty much unstoppable at this point, because I've just been sitting here talking to you for 5 minutes, and this thing is going to build a product that people would have paid probably 100K for or more back in the day. And it would have taken weeks or months to build. Now, I realize at this point that this isn't production ready if we were going into enterprise or mid-market. But for the most part, it brings us an MVP that we can put in front of people to show them the power of something. And then I can just bring in my AI native engineers and get them to iron out any kinks and build this into a production ready system, bake in the security and all of that good stuff. But the importance here is the speed, because the speed is what gets us through the door, like I just mentioned. But I digress. Enough education there. You can see this thing is still just tinkering along and doing what it needs to do. So at this point, I'm probably going to let it do its thing, and I will jump back when there's something cool happening. Cool. So you can see here that it's now gone away and it started building all of the files that we needed to build. So we got our main SOP here. And for those of you who haven't watched my other videos, essentially what this agent does is it breaks things down into 3 different compartments. So we've got the SOPs, which are the main goals that we're trying to achieve. And then we have our tools section, which come under our employees over here. So these are going to be our deterministic tools, which are the Python scripts that do the specific task that we need to get it done, because we want the system to be deterministic. But the SOPs are the main goals. And there's a bunch of other files that we'll get into as they come up. So the purpose, continuously monitor competitors to detect strategic changes, pricing features, hiring, funding, positioning, and reviews, and generate actionable intelligence for sales, product, and executive teams. Great, that's exactly what I wanted. Then it gives an overview. It shows the 6-layer architecture. It's the data collection, the data parsing, the change detection, the threat scoring, the market positioning, and the intelligence output. So it's done a really good job so far of capturing exactly what I wrote. Suppose I gave it some really good information up front, which again is why it's so important to have context engineering, because it makes it easier for this thing. It doesn't have to do the guesswork for you. It could do the guesswork. I guarantee you, if I had have said that I just want this competitor analysis tool, it would go in there and it would find a whole bunch of cool stuff. But by doing this and showing a definition of done, I get exactly what I want as opposed to what the thing thinks that I want. And that's a very important differentiation. So yeah, it did a really good job. And right now it's building a score competitor threats.py. So let's come and have a look at our employees. You can ignore a lot of this other stuff. I have a lot of tools that I'm building and running in here. So, wow, yeah, okay, so it's built a lot of stuff. Scrape competitor website. So here is the employee or the tool that goes and scrapes our competitors' websites. Building a scraper, it could do it itself, but equally there are certain things that we're actually going to need scrapers for. So if you were on Crunchbase, you could use Apify. If you didn't have your own Crunchbase API key, you could probably potentially build your own until they block you. With LinkedIn, you definitely don't want to do that because they're pretty smart. So that's why I use Relevance AI. I had a subscription to them already. That's the only reason that I'm using their LinkedIn scraper. But you can use Apify. They've got one as well. And there's a few other products that will do it for you too. But otherwise, clearly this thing can just build us a simple web scraper now. I think websites are mostly pretty easy to scrape. The other thing that will be interesting to see is if this thing actually understands that it's going to need specific tools for specific things. And also interestingly, it seems to be building everything around not having MCP. So this thing isn't baking any MCP in for certain things. And I wonder why. But we'll see. We shall see. Okay, we're nearly done, guys. Look at this. Just 3 more points. Right now it's updating our employee manifest. So I have this manifest.md file. And what this thing does is, because I now have so many tools in here, rather than have my AI orchestrator, every time I come in here and want to do something, it would have to traverse the entire SOPs folder, the entire employees folder to find specific things. So I built a manifest of all of this, and every time it creates new tools or a new SOP, it has to update the manifest with a brief description of what the tool or what the SOP is so that it can find it easily. It just reads the manifest before it does anything. It prevents you creating duplicate stuff, and it prevents you wasting time and tokens on it having to traverse all of this stuff. So it's really important to have a manifest when you're building out a system like this. You can see there it updated everything with the purpose and whatever it is that we're trying to get out of it. And then finally, it's going to create a setup instructions document. So every time you build something in here, it will always give you an instructions document, which is amazing. So even if there are parts that it missed, things it couldn't do, or steps you need to take to give it authorization, this thing is going to give you a setup instruction for you to do that. So it's really helpful. And after that, it's going to finally create our README, and the README is just explaining how the entire system works. Depending on what you ask for, it could give you a whole bunch of different things. Usually it gives you a little walkthrough of how each part of the system works and how it integrates with one another to get the expected result. Okay, so it's done the README. doing its final checks, updating its to-do list, and we should just about be done. There we go. Perfect. I've built the complete competitor intelligence system for you. Here's what's been created. Gives us our core documentation, the configuration files, our employee scripts, 13 in total. So remember, these are the tools. Our main orchestrator is that one over there. So this is what's going to be running the thing, which I'm not going to do manually, of course. I'm going to get it to do it. What you need to do next, add API keys to the .env. Cool. That makes sense. So the Apollo API key, my relevance company tool, which I will add. Update the config files, edit company positioning, replace with your company's actual positioning, add or remove competitors you want to monitor. Cool, that makes sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill all of this stuff in. I thought it would have just used the examples that I put in. Maybe they are there, in which case I will just tell it to use those. But if not, I'll just add them anyway. And then we do a first run test. That makes sense. So this, if we want to run this test, it will scrape ClickUp website, fetch Apollo data, blah, blah, blah. Cool. I don't want to use GPT 4.0 though. Definitely don't want to do that. Full run, all competitors. So then it shows us our complete workflow. That's pretty cool. Scrape websites, Apollo reviews, pass, blah, 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 store, detect, score, filter, and output. So I think it didn't ask for Slack because historically in the system I have built Slack. So it'll be interesting to see if it just assumes it's going to send it to the group that it used to send messages to. But in the meantime, off screen, I will go create a new Slack group, put in my API keys, and get this thing set up in exactly the way that I wanted to output the results to me. And then we'll do our first test run. Okay, so here I am in Slack. We're just going to create a quick bot, competitor analysis. So it's really straightforward. And again, if you didn't have this, the thing would just give you a guide to do it. So we're going to put it in here and we're going to create it. And then I'm going to go off screen because this is going to reveal a whole bunch of security stuff once I go down here. Okay, so I've pretty much done most of the things that it wanted. I've set up the Slack channel, set up the API keys and things like that. A few things to note, you can see here, so in our config.yaml files, this is where we would put in all of our company specific stuff that it would later inject into the system. So you can see here, it's really done an amazing job at breaking everything down because I didn't give it this low level information here. I just said, hey, we would want to get sent to Slack and all that type of thing. But it knew automatically that there might be more than one Slack group that we might want to send it to, or even individuals. So it's done that over here for competitor notifications, but then also email notifications. It's put in some examples, CRM integration and stuff like that. A lot of companies are using HubSpot and Salesforce, so this is really handy for that. I'm not going to be doing that in this example because I don't use HubSpot or Salesforce. I could just chuck it into ClickUp as an example, but for the most part, we're going to see what the system does just by looking at other things. Dashboard reporting links. Oh, wow. Okay, that'll be interesting. I want to see if it actually built the dashboards once we've done the test run. And then content preferences. So that's pretty cool. Slack alert sections, weekly briefing sections. Cool. So I'm going to tell this thing that I've now put in a bunch of information that it needed. I'm going to tell it just to roll with basic examples and assume that the competitors that were in our analysis are our competitors. I haven't given it an email address. It might be using my old credentials that I've done before. Hopefully it won't send an email to anyone, but let's just see. Cool, let's run a test run. Just use the example project flow data that I originally uploaded and presume our competitors are Asana, Monday.com, and ClickUp. So let's run a test run on those. I've set up the Slack channel called competitor analysis and I've invited the bot. I've given you all the API keys you need and I've given you the Slack bot token. I also need you to ensure that if you're sending emails to anyone that you ask me first just in our test run. You should have my Gmail credentials from a previous project that we built. If you need me to create any new Gmail auth tokens, let me know. Otherwise, let's run a test run and send everything to the one Slack channel that you can see. I suppose for our test run. I don't want it to go and modify any code and go and change the whole system. So let's see what it does with this information. Okay, so it's going through here and it's just checking that I've done everything that I said I did. It's finding my API keys. It's checking the group in Slack to see if it can access what we need. It's taking the bot token. Finding competitor analysis channel from the ENV. I see the Slack bot needs additional permissions to list channels. No problem. Let me update the configuration for the test to run. Okay, right, because it wants to list all of the channels, but we've only got one channel, so it should have done that. Email is already disabled. Great. Now let me run a test on a single competitor to see what it outputs. Cool. So let's see what you do. Good progress. I can see some issues to fix. Missing beautiful soup. Need to install. No idea what that is, but I'm guessing that it's about turning data into something human readable. I don't know. Syntax error in score competitor threats. There was a typo. Good job finding that. So now it's going away and fixing those three things. It's downloading beautiful soup. Good. Now let me check on the data we actually scraped. Check snapshot data. Excellent. The scraping worked. We have all the HTML files, pricing, product, careers, etc. The parsing failed though. Let me check what's going on. I see the issue. The environment variables aren't being passed to the sub-process calls. Let me fix the orchestrator to load the .env properly. You go do that, friend. Perfect. Now let me run the test again with the fixes. Excellent progress. The core system is working. That's the kind of voice that I'm going to give this thing. Scraping worked. Parsing worked. Change detection, threat scoring, relevance filtering, all worked. Issues to fix. Apollo API. Returned 422. Likely API key format or endpoint issue. Yeah, so that's going to be an issue because I don't have an account for that. So I might have to build a relevance scraper for G2 so we can see the reviews, and probably for Trustpilot as well. So it would be good to have Trustpilot included in this. Battle card brief generation failed because reviews data, yeah, there's none. Cool, okay. So I'm probably going to have to create this off screen quickly. I will create a relevance API scraper for G2. I might have to use Apify, and I'll do the same for Trustpilot. Okay, well, this thing is adamant that it's doing something, and it's been doing this for the last 7 minutes. So I'm going to change a few things while I'm waiting. There we go. It just went and did it. Anyway, I'm going to load some stuff up into here. A few things that I want to change for our next run. Instead of using GPT-4o, I want you to find out what is the latest model. It should be 5.2, and I want to use that model instead. But I don't want you to use directly through OpenAPI. Use the Helicone API key because I want to set up some observability, and I want all of our runs for LLMs to go through observability using Helicone. So if you haven't seen my observability, you should watch that now because there is a ton of useful stuff in there, apart from telling you your latency and cost management and all of that stuff. And it's really easy to set up. You can check the video on the screen right now. But I want that baked into here because I want to find out how much this thing is taxing my LLMs in order to do what it needs to do. A lot of it should be done with Python, but obviously some of the intelligence is done with AI. And this has been taking a while, so I want to find out why it's taking so long. I presume it's because it was using GPT 4.0, 40, whatever the hell. It was using a really old one, is the main point. So we're going to fix that, because it's just kind of doing this thing. So here I did a tail on the log file. Another thing, any system that you're building, if you don't put logs into it, obviously it's not going to know what is going on. So make sure you factor in logs. If you're building an NNN, factor in something that outputs useful logs for you so that you can troubleshoot it. And again, observability is going to help you as well. You can chuck Helicone into your NNN builds as well. Okay, so it's been taking so long that I just gave an output here. I wanted to find out what was going on, so I just asked it. And now it's going away and telling me. The process is still running, but the log file is empty. Okay, so the output is not working. So I asked it to kill the process. Good, kill the process. Here's what we've accomplished in the test run. Absolutely nothing. What's working? Scraping. Okay, cool. LLM parsing. Really? So then why is everything empty? Okay, so I'm going to go away and fix this stuff off screen, and then we're going to come back. I'm also going to make a few changes to the script so that this thing outputs things a bit better. Okay, so new plan, and I think I'll do it on screen just so people can see the stuff. So here I am in Relevance AI, which is essentially just like a drag and drop agentic platform where you can do the same stuff that we're doing in Claude Code, just with a graphical user interface. I don't necessarily use this ever, which is why I have such a mountain of credits. To me, it's far less intuitive than a lot of the other stuff that I use. But for the most part, it's got some pretty good proxies in place so we can do things like LinkedIn scraping. And they have a built-in tool for Trustpilot. But anyway, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build a tool. So we can just vibe code a tool here. I want a Trustpilot scraper. And it's going to go away. It might ask me some questions, I would hope, to clarify the context. And then it will go and build it. So once we've built that, I will then be able to grab an API key for the specific tool. I will then add it to my agentic workflow in our Claude code workspace, and we'll be able to use this to call on Trustpilot. So I'm not going to use G2 scraping for this. It is a pretty good site to get reviews, but for the most part, Trustpilot will give us tons of reviews on ClickUp, whether they're good or bad, so it will prove the point that we want to prove anyway. But we could do the same thing for G2. We could just go to Apify. If you don't know what Apify is, you can just go over here. And this pretty much has scrapers for most websites out there. So we could come in here and we could just type in G2 and let's see, does it have for G2? G2 product reviews scraper. 1.3 stars, wow, that's not very good. Anyway, we're going to roll with what we've got. So let's go back to relevance and see what this thing has done. What data do you want to extract from Trustpilot? Company reviews, specific company information, review stats. You know what, let's take all of them. So I'll say 1, all of that. 2, how will you provide the URL? Good question. Let's say a specific company's review page. No. A search query. Maybe. No, I'm going to go with a specific URL. Let's go with that. And I'll just get the agentic AI to make sure that it enforces a specific URL. Do you want to scrape just one page of reviews? Multiple pages of reviews from a company? Let's go with multiple. Sounds good. Any specific filtering? No, not really. That should be everything that it needs, and now it will go away and build our tool. In the meantime, I'm going to investigate our Apollo workflow and see why it's not accepting my API key. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do for some Apollo troubleshooting is we're just going to come here and ask it to check the API. So what I've done is I've searched my Apollo dashboard and found that there were no API calls to it. So we know that this thing has never connected and it's never tried to work. So that tells me possibly that this thing hasn't built the correct API structure or scripting that it needs in order to access the API. So I'm going to ask it to do that. Can you please research the official Apollo API information? Because from what I can see, we haven't tried to contact the API at all. Could there be something that you have misprogrammed? Or can you check if there is an MCP functionality we can use? Okay, and while it's doing that, let's go back to our scraper. Perfect. Let me build a Trustpilot scraper. There we go. Apparently it's done it. Multi-page scraping. Inputs, the URL. So Amazon.com. Assumptions made. Trustpilot uses page parameter for pagination, firecrawl. Yeah, I guess you could use firecrawl as well for a bunch of scraping. Anyway, let's have a look and see what it can get from ClickUp to see if it matches. So let me grab the actual URL. Let me go back here. Let me go to this. 3 pages max, that sounds good. I don't need a whole treasure trove of information, really just the last few days, maybe even up to a month, I don't know. See the recent stuff. Again, we would be comparing this over and over again. So let's see what it's going to do. While that's running, let's check on our other agent working efficiently in the background. I can see Apollo API client code. It's using post to that. I can see the Apollo API client. Let me wait for the research agent to finish checking the official docs. The agent is still running and researching. I can see it's fetching the official Apollo docs. Okay, that's cool. So you can see how valuable this is, because if you have a whole agent army working for you, as long as you have a brain to kind of point it in the right direction or get whatever it is that you want done, you can pretty much do anything now. Which again, just reiterates what I was saying at the beginning of this video about why it's so important to apply critical thinking. But none of this matters, like these videos, making even these products, none of it matters if either you don't know how to sell or if you don't partner with someone who does. But even then, you're going to have to convince them to join you, which is a form of selling yourself. So communication is super important, guys. It has always been, and it's going to be even more important for the future. So I really want to know why this system takes so long, because historically, I realize this is a big build, but it used to take a lot faster to do simple things, especially troubleshooting. So let's come back here, and this thing is allegedly done. Let's come and have a look at the output. Empty for company info, empty for reviews. That did not work. So this thing's lying to me. Nope, it's not lying to me. So the Firecrawl data is here, reviewer name, the rating that they gave, the title, and the text. It's just embedded in Firecrawl. Total reviews extracted, 0. So that's kind of working, but not really. So I can see the tool is kind of working. I can see in the Firecrawl JSON data that it is extracting some form of information. But then after it's done that, the total reviews extracted is still set to 0. And the final output doesn't show any relevant data. Can you troubleshoot why this is happening? Okay, so you go and find that stuff. And we're going to go back over here. Wow, this thing is still working away. So did it actually find the problem? Let's have a look up here. There is an MCP server. That's cool. Found a bunch of problems. The wrong base URL. That's going to be problematic. Wrong authentication. Cool. Wrong HTTP method. And wrong endpoint. Cool. So this thing initially set up everything entirely incorrect. There are MCP servers for Apollo that we could use instead. Would you like option A? Fix the direct API. I mean, we're kind of there already, so we might as well do that. And because let me fix the API client now, and you can decide if you want to switch to MCP later. Cool. So it made the decision for me. And that's the exact decision I would have chosen anyway. Okay, perfect. All 4 issues fixed. Now let's test if the Apollo API works. And let's go back here and see if this thing has done anything useful. I see the issue. The problem is that the Firecrawl response structure is different. Okay, cool. Okay, so it asked me to paste in some stuff, which I didn't do. It just kind of carried on rambling and did more stuff after that. So the problem, status check was wrong. The code was checking for Firecrawl, blah, blah, blah. Here's the fix and the expected output. The tool is now working correctly and extracting all the review data. Okay, so we're going to let this thing finish up its thing quickly, and then I'll come back and run a test. Let's check on our other workflow. Perfect, I've fixed all 4 issues, still running the test. Okay, it's taking a while, so I'm guessing that something is problematic again. Okay, so we've got some feedback from here. Interesting mixed results. Company enrichment, 403 forbidden. Yes, so I've only given it access to search for people and companies. I haven't given it the access to enrich anything because we don't want to do that anyway. So I found 7 executives, the 403 on company enrichment. So I need to give it more context. So with Apollo, I've only given you API access for non-enrichment tasks. You should still be able to find all of the company data, the funding data, and that sort of stuff on there. We don't necessarily need to use LinkedIn for that. I think there's far more information for our signals on Apollo. So can you access those via the API, or can you only see people? Good news, executive search is working. Let's focus just on getting the Apollo part right for now. Okay, it's going to go away and do that. We're going to come back here. And did this actually run? Let's have a look. Total reviews extracted, 40. That's a good sign. Company name, click up. Rating, yes, that's all great. And then here are the reviews. Perfect. So this tool's now working, and now we just hit save. It's going to save our tool. And I'm going to come over here and I want to change it from a vibe tool. So for some reason, save and publish. So for some reason, when you have these new tools, if this little thing is set to vibe, I can't actually share it, which is pretty confusing. And it took me a while to figure that out. So I need to come back into here. If you have this problem, this is how you fix it. Come up to here and you want to convert this to a default builder, which is just the manual way of building tools in Relevance AI. Pretty much the same thing, but you see, so it's using Python to do what it needs to do, and it's going to give us our output. So now what I need to do is I need to hit publish. That publishes our tool in this format. And then when I want to share the API key, I come on over to use, and I'm going to click on API. And when I do that, it will give me the ability to have an API key for this tool specifically. So I'm going to do that off screen so that my editor doesn't have to waste his time blanking out the API keys. Okay, so I have added my Trustpilot scraper key to my .env file, so that's good to go. And this thing is still just checking out the Apollo API to see what it can and can't do. So the agent's still working, the agent is still working, it's still researching. Let me check what we actually got back from the Apollo API. The response might already include company data. So yeah, this is really taking a lot longer than normal. And I'm intrigued. We're running out of context, and then it's going to auto-compact it. The session is being continued from a previous conversation that ran out, yeah. So we ran out of context because it was doing so much. But that's cool because now it can pick up where it left off. I'll check the research agent's findings on Apollo. Excellent, the research agent found comprehensive information. Let me summarize the findings. Cool, we found funding, industry, growth year, the employees of the company. That's a lot of information. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this thing a little nudge. Now I'll update function to use organizations. Okay, so it was just about to do the thing that I was about to paste in. I was just about to give it the docs that it needed to do its thing. Search organization, domain API key. Yeah. So you can see there it switched over from company enrichment, which we don't want to do, to search organization, which is the document that we just found over here as part of the API docs. Interesting. Your organization search didn't find ClickUp. Then something's going on. Okay, so it's still going to go away and fix more of that. And you can see in this video, compared to my other videos, there are a lot of moving parts. So historically in my other videos, there was a lot less back and forth with me and the agent. But the more complex you get, the more obviously you're going to have to help this thing because there are a ton of parts. And to some degree, it shows the importance of context engineering because I didn't give this thing context around Apollo. I put in brackets, we can probably use Apollo. But if I was really smart, I would have gone in there and said, here's my Apollo API key. This is the documentation that we're going to be using in order to access the organizations tab, that sort of stuff. And there we go, I hit my limit. So I'm going to go off screen and I'm going to go buy some more cred. And then I'm going to come back and finish this build and probably just give it the documentation that it needs because we're nearly there. Okay, we're now on the max plan, guys. So our opportunities are endless. Continue. Excellent. The organization search returned data in accounts. The response shows. There we go. Click up. Cool. This is excellent data. It includes revenue, founded year, blah, blah, blah. It's in the accounts array, not the organization array. Okay. I'm also going to, here are the docs for the org search, if it helps. So it might take into that context. It probably already read that thing. Either way, it's now going to give us more information that we need. Yes, everything is working. That's fantastic. Okay, so it found a bunch of stuff, but it hasn't found the employee count, which is weird, and the industry, which is also weird, and funding data. So funding data might just not be accessible via the API. I wonder. The doc page has limited info. Let me search. So in parallel, what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to run a perplexity search to see if they've gated the funding data from API access. They might have done that because there's a lot of scrapers out there where you can actually just bypass using Apollo and get all of their information from them, in which case they would have gated that information. But maybe not. I'm going to check. Okay, I think I finally found the issue after doing some actual digging. And I think in order to get the funding information and some other stuff, I'm actually going to have to do some enrichment of the company. I suppose that's how they do it, to ensure that you're using their credits instead of just getting this information for free. So I'm going to come back to my Apollo and I'm going to connect the enrichment tab. And then each time we research a company, it's going to enrich all the fields. That's why it couldn't find some basic ones, I'm guessing, for the organization. So let me do that. And then we're going to run the tool again and see if it finds what we need. Check out this doc on organization enrichment or do a Google search. I think in order for us to get funding information and some of the other really pertinent organization information, we're going to need to enrich them. So you should be able to use that API key. No, actually you won't. Fuck. I've written a new API key that you can use that will give you access to enrichment as well. I think the issue was that I didn't give you enough functionality within the API key. I've now generated a new key and given you full permission to do enrichments and all sorts of things. Please review the organization enrichment doc I have attached. We should now be able to scrape and do anything that we want from Apollo using the new key. Run a quick test on Apollo to see if we can get the funding information and all the other juicy stuff that we need after reading the docs and understanding how this all works. Okay, so that should solve that problem. I've also uploaded my Trustpilot API key, so we should have the scraper that we need in order to scrape the review information. Then the next thing, what I want to do is I'm going to test the Slack channel. So we need to understand that Slack is working and outputting in the format that we want it to. Instead of sending emails, I'm rather just going to get it to generate a report, because realistically, I would want an attached report to an email as opposed to the email just being flooded with information itself. So we're going to get it to do that, and we'll make it really pretty. And then finally, if we have some time, we're going to build a dashboard. But this video has already been trailing on for ages. And we can see here that this thing's now running away and doing some stuff. I've upgraded the API access, blah, blah, blah. That was me doing that. The web search didn't give me detailed parameter structure. Let me just test the enrichment endpoint directly with the new API key. So that's what it's currently doing now. I see the API key. Let me test the enrichment endpoint. And it's really cool because you can see its thinking process. So it helps you understand your own troubleshooting and thinking methodologies if you haven't developed that yet. There we go. Excellent. The enrichment endpoint is working perfectly. That's great with the new API key. We're now getting a treasure trove of data, and that's exactly what I want to hear. I want the treasure trove. Look at that. Financial intelligence, funding stage. Perfect. So this will save you having to get Crunchbase stuff if you already have Apollo. Full funding history, headcount intelligence. Wow, that's perfect. Technology stack, even better. Company intelligence. Now, obviously, you can use all of this for a whole bunch of other things as well. We wouldn't just use this kind of information for competitor intelligence, because there are tons of other things that you could use what tech they have. If you were trying to reach out to them as an AI consultant, you could see they have a ton of tools, in which case they might have disparaged work silos where people are using their own things like that. And you could lead in there with an AI audit, blah, blah, blah. Although because ClickUp is kind of AI native, they've probably all got their stuff together. But point being, tech stacks are super important. If you're trying to sell DevOps people, knowing they have AWS and this and that gives you lots of angles to work with. So that's why all of this information is so important, apart from company intelligence. So it's coming down here. Oh, it even shows us their customers. That's cool. Now let me update the main function to use enrichment by default. Okay, there we go. Right, so we just need to enrich these people, and that's fine. You know, I've got so many tokens in Apollo that doesn't matter. And the information that we get from this is worth far more than whatever you pay for Apollo anyway. Successfully enriching ClickUp data. Great. Awesome. We can run a full one now. But before we do that, those changes. Okay, first a couple of changes. I want you to change the OpenAI model that we're using from GPT 4.0 to the latest one, which please do research on that. I think it's 5.2. I also want that to be routed through our Helicone API because I want to set up some observability for this platform. So please route that through Helicone. The API key is already in the .env, and use the ChatGPT 5.2 model through that. Then I want to test our Slack functionality. So you should be sending everything for the test to the single group that you can see for our competitor analysis. And then finally, for the weekly brief that we would normally email, put that in a pretty output format that's human readable, and put it in some kind of document so that we can see the structure. Perhaps use HTML if that's suitable for you, unless you can create a PDF quite easily. And put that in the output structure that I instructed you when we first created the system. Once you have this all planned out, we can do our test run, but first sort out these issues. Okay, so hopefully we're at the last leg of this now. We've ironed out some of the kinks. I do actually need to tell it about the Trustpilot thing, which I didn't do. But I told it to pause. First, I wanted to go and set up all of this stuff and understand what it's doing. The user wants me to update OpenAI model. Yep, because GPT 4.0 is really old. Route through Helicone. So if you haven't seen my observability video, check that one out, because that's going to tell us how much this thing costs roughly. Obviously, there are other fixed costs that we have, like the Apollo subscription and things like that. But you can easily calculate that, and it's super important to have that information if you're trying to sell a product, because it helps people understand what your product actually costs to run. Test Slack functionality, we definitely want to do that. And the weekly brief format to make it human readable, HTML or PDF. Be interesting to see if it can make me a PDF. I imagine the answer is already yes. So it's broken down the tasks that it needs to do, and it's going to go through them one by one. Let me handle these configuration changes systematically. I'll research the latest models, set up Helicone routing, configure Slack, and set up the brief output format. So historically, if you didn't have time to watch the observability video yet, it's really easy. All you do is essentially replace the routing and API that it will be using, which is directly with OpenAI or Claude, whatever you're using, with Helicone's own API key. And that's it. So essentially it runs through there and then it goes on to OpenAI. Something you need to be aware of if you are setting up observability is that any client data would of course be traversing through two systems then. It's not just going to be going to OpenAI, it goes to Helicone first, or whichever observability tool you put in the middle of it. Okay, so this thing is hallucinating because it's saying that the latest model is 4.0, which is just not true. Obviously we know that. But otherwise it's chugging along and doing everything else. I think the issue might be that it can't find 5.2. Maybe 5.2 is not publicly available yet at the time of me recording this video. So I might have to go with 5.1, in which case it'll probably find that. I'm adamant that GPT 5.1 is available via API, as I've tested it several times. Please do not use 4.0. Okay, so it kind of does things on the fly, which is cool. It's just going to do this and then it will go back to doing whatever tasks that it needs to do. So that's really handy. So far, the video has been recording for about 1 hour and 51 minutes. Realistically, the amount of time that that's taken, if we take in the 10-minute context engineering that I chucked in, plus some other things. So far it's been about 1.5 hours of troubleshooting, which really isn't bad if you compare it to the time it historically would take and the amount of effort and the teams involved in doing something like this. It's just crazy that I can sit here and on this video talk you through what we're actually doing without me having any real understanding of Python or something that's going on. You really just need to understand how the system works and where you want to get to, which is why that focus on context engineering is super important. Okay, so it's gone through its thing, updating the final to-do list and all the tasks that it's just changed. We're now using GPT 5.1, which is exactly what we want. The Helicone integration is done, so that's also great news. Now we'll have observability and we'll be able to see how much latency there is, how many tokens it's using, how much this thing costs. Slack configuration is all set up and the executive brief in HTML. Ready for a test run. One more thing, instead of using G2 to find reviews and other things, we're going to use Trustpilot. I've updated the env with a relevance AI Trustpilot API key. You will use that to run the Trustpilot scraping. It will return the information that we need based on user reviews and things like that. So essentially replacing Trustpilot with, essentially replacing G2 with Trustpilot. My brain broke for a second there. It's been long. Cool. After you've updated anything that needs updating, we can then run the test run. So you can see we had to squash the context again here. We had to compact because we used so much context in the previous conversation. So anyway, it passes it down and it just goes into a new chat. I'll continue replacing G2 with Trustpilot. Let me first check review scraping employees exist. Everything's there. It understands what it needs to do. Now I understand the structure. The current G2 review scraper does basic HTML scraping. I need to update it to use Relevance AI's Trustpilot API instead. Be interesting to see if it understands how it's going to come back. I imagine during the test run it will understand that it's bringing back JSON data and then it might adjust the tool that we built specifically for the Trustpilot scraper within our agentic workflow. But we'll see how it handles that. Maybe it's already just set up to handle JSON data. I could have automatically told it to do that. Maybe that would have been some good context, but it will do it for the most part. So here it's going through everywhere that it had G2, obviously self-explanatory, just replacing it with Trustpilot. All competitors now use Trustpilot URLs instead of G2. Now I need to update the review scraper, mark the current loop is complete, blah, 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 blah. And then finally, we're going to test the complete system. Okay, so I think we're just about ready. This is the final moment, potentially. Another thing that I love about this system is that it really knows how to keep everything up to date. So it doesn't just take care of like our tools and our standard operating procedures and things like that, but it also comes into any README file or any walkthrough that it's done, and it makes sure that it changes the context of how the system works. So not only does it always know itself, but any user who picks this up, it has those changes implemented. So it's really smart. Anytime it makes a change, it makes a change for the human and for the machine, which is awesome. Perfect. I found the orchestrator. I can see this. Right, so it has a few more things to change for the Trustpilot. And then we're probably ready to run our test run. Here we go. Test the complete system with all changes. So now it's automatically running a test on ClickUp, and we can jump over to our Helicone dashboard to see if it's using any of our agents. Okay, so some awesome stuff has happened off screen. Firstly, we got some errors in Helicone. Again, this is why observability is so important. If we didn't have this super smart agent to look at stuff, this would give us a lot of information about why a system might not be working. Not going to go into it in depth here, but point being, we saw some runs here and we had 4 errors. This was around about the time our system started. So if I go on over to rate limits, I can have a look here and I see, oh, that one was successful, fantastic. So the error that it found was a 400 error, and you can see here, the system that we built with the agentic solution, it was trying to send through unsupported parameter max tokens, but it actually needed to be something else. So every time it ran something to scrape a website, it couldn't do it. And just for side context, it's really cool because it shows you the prompt that it gave the system that it built itself. I didn't write these prompts, obviously. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, point being is that I would have come in here and I would have found this error and then try to figure out how to do that. But our system was smart enough to know that that is the exact problem. Don't use max underscore tokens, use max underscore completion underscore tokens instead. And I found a bunch of other issues on the first test run. And then automatically, as we can now see, it's gone through there and it's solved all of our problems for us. But for you as the user, if you aren't only using this agentic workflow, even if you have N8N or something, routing it through here is super valuable for your clients. Because you can find things like this that didn't exist, but more importantly, we can understand the cost of our system. We can understand the latency involved in each step. How many tokens are we using? And then to bring those things down, we would improve it ourselves. So this isn't a video about that though. That would take too long. And I have a video on that already, so hopefully you watched it. All configuration changes complete. Test results summary, website scraping done. Apollo API enrichment done, LLM parsing done, we have proven that. Change detection, blah, 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 need to fix, Trustpilot endpoint URL. Here is the Trustpilot tool endpoint URL. So we're going to paste that in there. This tool expects the exact URL for Trustpilot's reviews. I'll paste in an example for ClickUp below. So just so that it actually implements this correctly, I'm going to come on over to ClickUp and I'm going to paste this in here. So that should cover the trust point thing. Let's skip Capterra. We've got that information elsewhere, so it's not an issue anymore. You can just remove that part. Otherwise, update these couple of things in here and let's redo a test run on ClickUp. Alrighty, so I think I've solved the problem. There was a lot of back and forth off screen here, but essentially we fixed the problem. So there was an issue with the relevance AI authorization header, so we fixed that now. And it seems to have rebuilt our script the way that we want it done. So that's perfect. The scraping is now working 100% for Trustpilot. I also fixed up some stuff with Slack because a few things weren't working with Slack, so I went through that and I fixed it all. Again, just asking questions, not doing anything technically relevant that would enlighten you. So that's why I cut it, because the video is getting a bit long. But I think now we are ready for our full run. So let's tell this thing first to make us some dummy data, because enough time obviously hasn't passed between our imaginary company and our competitors. So I'm going to ask it to create a whole bunch of data to fill out every single one of the fields that we've created and send the message to Slack and do the other good stuff. Cool, so I want to do a full test run now. Can you please give me some dummy data so that every single field in all of our reports and all our Slack messages gets filled out with something relevant and something cool that I can show on this YouTube video. So edit any data that you need to in our database or whatever to make sure that it's filled with accurate information. And again, you can see here it's rationalizing what it needs to do. So it's going through every single piece of data that it needs for its system to update everything, specifically for the dummy data. It wouldn't necessarily do this step every time because obviously it would be there. But you can see it's checking everything, like for the battle cards, every point that needs to be established for the battle cards to work, and the executive brief and stuff like that. Let me create a comprehensive dummy data that will fill every field in your reports and Slack alerts with impressive, realistic data for your YouTube demo. And hopefully it's going to pay off. Over here you can see it's reasoning that the current snapshot is identical to the historical snapshot because they were both created at the same time. So it needs to create a diff between the two now so that we can make this impressive demo look better. So that's what it's going to do. Dummy data for YouTube demo, blah, blah, blah. Let's go and do this. And you can see down here, it's creating a previous 7-day baseline and then a new current data. So again, this is all dummy data, but obviously if we were doing a real example, this would be a lot faster because it wouldn't need to go and literally go through every single field and create this mimicked dummy data. It would be harvesting it ideally while we're sleeping. So we can wake up and get this fresh report of what's going on or get any alerts immediately. It's kind of interesting just watching this thing do stuff that historically an entire team would do back and forth. Can you imagine the amount of pull requests and how many days people would have sat reviewing this or waiting for someone to review something before a change actually got made? It's crazy. And here it is generating all the stuff that we need. So the moment of truth is really close. This is what we've all been waiting for, especially me, because I want to get up and get away from the screen now. Show me what was generated. The Slack alert, the battle card, and the executive brief. This better blow my mind. It allegedly did everything. So if you made it this far into the video, well done you. I appreciate not just your time, but also your attention span. Now, I just want to cover a few things because obviously you already know that we completed the build. It was at the beginning of the video. But if you came this far, then obviously you're looking for what's next. So what I've done is I've included the entire system for free in the description. You can grab it in the YouTube description below. And you should see a folder called YouTube Stuff. And every single thing that you need in order to run the system will be there. So what you will do is you'll come into your folder and you would just put this into VS Code like I've got it in here. But if you haven't watched any of my other videos and you haven't got this environment set up yet, what you need is the main skill for Claude. So again, this will also be in the description. But what this awesome little file does is it sets up the whole environment for us. So it will create your SOP folder, your employees folder. It also understands how the environment works and things like that. So if you haven't set up a VS Code or anti-gravity environment, whatever, get the IDE, which is this thing that we're using in case you didn't know, and copy this MD file into your environment. You can just put it into any folder that you want, and then open up a Claude chat or Codex, whatever you want to use, and just say, initialize our environment. Just type it in here and it will go away and it will do it for you. Once it's done that, it will run through this main SOP that we've got over here, set the entire thing up for you. Once that's done, you're going to bring in this YouTube Stuff folder and you can say, call it whatever you want to call it, competitor analysis tool, and then just ask Claude or Codex, hey, I've built this new tool. Can you analyze, see how it works so that I know how we can make any changes or run it, whatever it is that you want to do for your specific environment. And it really is as simple as that. Now, I will say two things. If you're a business and you want this done properly, feel free to get in touch with us, the link below, and we can build this out for you properly. We have a whole team of AI native developers who can do this securely and the way that it's meant to be done. If you're an aspiring consultant or someone like me, I have a school community that you can join. But also keep in mind, if you're going to be selling this to people, while this is production ready for me, I don't care. This is my environment. It's all my own stuff. I know how to do what I need to do. The question of production ready comes into this. You could technically sell this to someone and then, figure things out in their development environment. But realistically, this needs to run through evals. It needs to run through a whole bunch of things before it is truly production ready for mid-market or definitely enterprise. So you've got to think about these things before you just go and willy-nilly sell this stuff. Because a lot of what's going on YouTube is people promising sell this for 10K, but realistically you can do that, but it might bite you in the ass down the line if you don't do proper testing and have security in place. Data privacy, governance, all that boring stuff that no one talks about, it's super important because that's what's going to protect your image in the long run. Anyway, that's just the fun police stuff. This thing works. You can make it work even better, make it more efficient. If I wanted to do something like that, I would switch from Claude, maybe get Gemini or Codex to review this thing and ask it, how can you make it better? Are there any privacy gaps? Are there any data governance issues? Stuff like that. So if you didn't have the money to get a developer for a day or two to review it, you could at least get a couple of AI models to check over it and find extra gaps. I would obviously still recommend that you do pay for a day or two of developers' time to thoroughly review this to make sure that you understand what you're doing before you try and sell it. But I digress. Thanks very much for watching the video so far. Leave some comments below. It really helps the channel grow. Otherwise, check out the videos on the screen right now. They're definitely going to help you on your journey. I'll see you guys out there.